The grand examination hall of the Galactic Institute buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 species prepared for the most challenging test in known space. The Unified Theory Assessment. This wasn't just any exam. It was the legendary evaluation that determined admission to the Institute's advanced physics program, a test so notorious that most civilizations considered a passing score to be a mark of generational genius. Professor Zyxthera observed her testing chamber with 6 centuries of academic experience. Her compound eyes tracked the various species as they arranged their specialized equipment. The Velthari with their quantum calculators, the Korthak with their probability matrices, the crystalline ethereals with their harmonic computation devices. Each student had brought the pinnacle of their civilization's mathematical technology. All except the human. Jake Morrison sat at his assigned station with nothing but what appeared to be a primitive writing implement and a small stack of plant-based paper. The 22-year-old from Earth looked almost bored as he waited for the examination to begin, occasionally glancing around at his fellow test-takers with casual interest. "Attention candidates," Professor Zyxthera announced through her translation matrix. "You have 4 standard hours to complete the Unified Theory Assessment. The examination covers quantum mechanics, relativistic physics, multidimensional mathematics, and theoretical temporal dynamics. You may begin now." The testing hall immediately filled with the sounds of frantic activity. Claws scratched against computation surfaces. Energy fields hummed as alien devices powered up, and nervous breathing created a symphony of anxiety from dozens of different respiratory systems. Vector the Brilliant, pride of the Zolonian Empire and winner of 17 academic prizes, activated his molecular-level calculation engine and began processing the first question. The problem involved calculating the quantum probability matrices for a 17-dimensional spacetime fold while accounting for temporal paradox prevention. His civilization's most advanced computer estimated it would take approximately 47 minutes to solve. Sci-Fi the Wise, whose species had mastered mathematics before most worlds had developed multicellular life, began the delicate process of harmonizing his crystalline computation arrays. The opening question alone would require synthesizing data from 12 different branches of theoretical physics. Meanwhile, human Jake Morrison glanced at the first question, wrote something on his primitive paper, and moved to question 2. Professor Zyxthera's attention was drawn to the human station by the simple fact that nothing was happening. No technological activation, no complex calculations, no signs of the intense mental strain that typically characterized encounters with the Unified Theory Assessment. The human was simply writing. By the time Vector had finished reading question 1 completely, Jake Morrison was on question 7. "This is impossible," whispered Mordeath the Contemplative, whose species spent decades in meditation before attempting major calculations. "The human isn't even using computational assistance." Professor Zyxthera moved closer to observe. What she saw defied everything she understood about advanced physics education. The human wasn't performing complex calculations or running sophisticated algorithms. Instead, he appeared to be writing what looked like shortcuts for the 17-dimensional spacetime problem that was currently overheating Vector's molecular calculator. Jake had written, assuming standard universal constants and typical fold dynamics, 4.7 times 10 to the power of 23 probability ratio. Temporal paradox avoided via causality loop buffer. See attached sketch. The attached sketch was a simple diagram that somehow reduced a 17-dimensional mathematical concept to what appeared to be basic geometry. 30 minutes into the 4-hour examination, Jake Morrison stood up, walked to Professor Zyxthera's desk, and submitted his completed test. The entire hall fell silent. 437 questions covering the most advanced theoretical physics in the galaxy, completed in less time than most species needed to read the instructions. Professor Zyxthera stared at the paper documents. Actual physical paper, covered in primitive ink markings. "Mr. Morrison," she said carefully, "are you certain you've completed the examination thoroughly?" Jake smiled with the easy confidence that seemed to characterize his species. "Yes, ma'am. Though I should mention, question 284 has a small error in the temporal constant. Should be 9.7, not 9.9. And questions 301 through 315 are basically asking the same thing 7 different ways, so I just solved the underlying principle once and noted the variations. He paused thoughtfully. Oh, and I included some suggestions for improving the quantum stability calculations in Section 12. The current method works, but it's pretty inefficient. There's a much simpler approach. Professor Zyxthera's compound eyes focused on the papers with growing amazement. The human hadn't just completed the most challenging examination in galactic history. He had critiqued it and offered improvements. 2 hours later, when the first non-human student finally submitted their test, preliminary scoring had already begun. Jake Morrison hadn't just passed the unified theory assessment. He had achieved a perfect score while simultaneously solving several long-standing theoretical problems that had puzzled galactic physicists for generations. In his exit interview, Jake was asked how humans had developed such advanced mathematical capabilities. "Oh, we didn't," he replied cheerfully. "Most of this stuff is just pattern recognition once you realize that physics is basically the universe trying to be as lazy as possible. Everything follows the path of least resistance, so you just figure out what would be easiest for reality to do, and that's usually the right answer." The Galactic Institute immediately revised their admission standards. Not to make them harder, but to create a separate category for applicants who might accidentally solve the fundamental mysteries of existence while taking what they thought was a routine test.